Welcome to the next episode of Beyond Reps. In this episode, myself and Charlie want to talk about why we choose to stay natural and why you should too. But first off, Charlie, how you doing?
I am all good, mate. No complaints other than photo shoot prep is becoming a struggle. Just over 2 weeks now to go until the actual photo shoot. So about a week and a half left of just digging deep and enjoying the suck. It's definitely an interesting experience. Everything just hurts. Everything aches. I spoke to you about it the other day in the gym. Everything is just heavy, and like steps are a big struggle. Like legs are heavy. Food isn't too much of an issue. I know how to handle the hunger, like consistent meal times, big voluminous meals. I'm living off like eggs and egg whites and salads at the minute because it just fills me up. But yeah, it's definitely getting to a point where I'm now ready for the prep to be over. But other than that, life is going smoothly. How are you?
All good. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned about going through the suck. Obviously, that's a little bit of a teaser for next week's episode where we will be going into the details of what your photo shoot prep has been like and what my prep was like and just the reality of being shredded. So watch this space for that. In terms of what I've been up to, my cut has been put on hold temporarily because last week was my birthday. So 28 years old, had a really good week. Obviously enjoyed some food. What I'm finding at the minute is that I'll try as best as I possibly can to minimise my calories. I'm not tracking at the minute, so I'm still intuitively cutting, which is definitely the first mistake, a bit of a rookie mistake there. But then something will just come up, maybe once a day or every other day. So it'll be like, oh, it's your birthday, have a bit of birthday cake. And then actually, like yesterday, it was my dad's birthday, coincidentally. So we were speaking over the weekend about having some Battenberg cake, because I haven't had Battenberg cake in ages. So we popped into Morrison's, got some Battenberg cake and had some of that. And it's like, oh, that's just another like 300 calories or whatever. That probably just pushed me into maintenance. So, but life is for living. I'm not obviously competing, as you guys know. I'm just doing this for me really, and just over a cut over summer. So look, getting back locked in this week for sure, and we'll see that. Hopefully, see that scale weight drop down again. But yeah, just as a reality check that I'm normal like everyone else. I think everyone else, when they try and do a cut, they have the same sort of challenges that I do. Mostly that comes around from like family and offering like desserts and things like that. And you don't always want to say no, but it's just a bit of a balance. So body weight has seen a small uptick to about just over 90 kilos, but we'll get back under 90 kilos, I'm sure, by the end of the week.
Yeah, it's relatively easy to get back to normal, and those life events do happen. It's just a case of just returning back to your normal routine when you can. Obviously, birthdays are there to be celebrated. I had a similar experience this week where it was really nice weather for the bank holiday, and my family suggested a barbecue. I'm at the point now where barbecue food is not realistic to fit into the diet. 1,800 calories. I need filling, nutritious food, and as much as I wanted a barbecue, it's just not realistic. And there wasn't really a reason for it. It was just like, it's nice weather. I also know that it's coming up to summer, so barbecues are going to be a regular thing. I can say no now, but the fact that you don't have anything to prepare for, you're not aiming for a specific goal, you can say yes to the birthday cake, you can say yes to the Battenberg. I was actually thinking about Battenberg the other day, funnily enough, and how long it's been since I've had one. But if I wasn't on prep, I probably wouldn't afford it. So I'm probably going to have some post prep. But yeah, it's definitely feasible to fit those things in if you are just kind of going through it for more lifestyle purposes. Obviously, I have that set end goal in sight, and I know what I need to do now to help me get there. And yeah, it's just interesting to have those differences.
I think Battenberg cake needs to go top of your list. Like post show, like what you're going to be binging on, you need to put Battenberg cake right up there. We got ours from Morrison's, which was a Mr. Kipling one, and it was, to be fair, like I haven't had any in like it must be like 10, 15 years or so since I was a little kid, but certainly a very long time. And yeah, it was absolutely unreal. The marzipan especially was a real treat, but you could literally taste like the amount of like sugar it's got in it. So now that I'm obviously a lot more health conscious than when I probably previously consumed it, I'm like, oh my god, you literally taste and feel like the sugar crystals in it. But all part of the experience. I've got no regrets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think post prep donuts are first on my list. So where we're doing this shoot, there's this company called Donuts, and they do like these big, huge filled donuts, and I'm actually fantasizing about them right now. They're that special, but they had them in Lincoln when I lived there. But yeah, I think Battenberg and pizza is definitely up there on my list as well. So I'm intrigued to see how my taste buds respond, because as I've mentioned previously, like things like cucumber, they just tingle my taste buds at the moment. So anything sugary or anything flavoursome or highly palatable is probably going to send my dopamine into wild drive, overdrive.
Sounds like you'll go through the experience that I had when I competed. Obviously, we talked offline about it, but yeah, I absolutely binged post-show and consumed a ludicrous amount of Dominoes. And then I thought, oh, what goes well with Dominoes? Oh yeah, some ice creams. And I thought I'd have some ice cream afterwards, some cookies. And then I was like, oh, what goes well with this? Bowl of granola and honey. And then because you're just so desperate to eat as like much food as you can, really highly calorific. You've been so restricted for so long. So yeah, that ended up with me basically sitting on the edge of my bed for the majority of the night. Didn't know whether I was going to throw up or not, and was just absolutely bloated. Although I got a wild pump the next day, and probably the next couple of days, to be fair, from all those carbs being shoved into my system.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I'm going to try and control as best I can. Obviously, the day of and the day after might involve a bit of overconsumption, but it's then the following days after that. So I don't want that to be like a daily thing, you know, a pizza here, a bit of cake there, but then as long as it's not like repeated exposure to that food and excessive calories, then, you know, I don't want to put all this effort into getting to this point to then just put on 5, 6, 7, 8 kilos within the first week. So yeah, that's something me and my coach are aware of and trying to maintain that balance. But yeah, I'll definitely enjoy some highly palatable, tasty foods, but hopefully try to avoid those post binge sickness feelings as well.
Yeah, that post-show window, it can be pretty nasty. So good luck with that. Let's move on then to the topic of today's discussion then. So we wanted to go through and discuss about why you should stay natural. This is something that's probably really, really close to my heart. I also acknowledge my bias, like at the start of this podcast, because I am a lifetime natural. I've competed twice naturally. I've always followed bodybuilding I always followed the natural principles, I guess, of bodybuilding. Charlie's never used any PED uses, as far as I'm aware. He might make a confession in a moment. But yeah, so he's also natural as a lifetime. So we both followed that journey for years and years and years as a natural, and what comes alongside that, I guess, is my appreciation for bodybuilding in general. Like, I'm a huge fan of bodybuilding and understand that professionally bodybuilding requires the use of PEDs in order to compete at a professional level and certainly to go onto the Olympia, etc. So I'm aware of that side of the industry, but I've always stuck to it naturally. I'd also say that and acknowledge before we hop into it that there is a lot more information available now than there ever has been, and a lot of that information is of really, really high standard. So for example, like 10-20 years ago, like no one was talking about the preaching about the safer usage model, where you're checking your blood markers every single month, or when you go on and off cycle. They weren't preaching about getting your heart checks completed regularly. They weren't preaching about monitoring certain levels within like other tests that you can monitor as well. So none of that was being talked about. However, nowadays there is a lot of positive Instagram influencers who are bodybuilders who discuss that. Like Joe Brightman's one that comes to mind. Obviously, he did a video recently discussing this as well. But I would say, along with that excellent information that's out there, there also is a lot of misinformation or poor. I'd refer to them, to be honest, as like horrendous influencers who are influencing young kids who are within their teenage years, when their testosterone, to be honest, is at their absolute peak, to try and hop on gear in the attempt to pursue gaining a ludicrous amount of mass in a short window, with no acknowledgement of the health risks that come to this, and no acknowledgement of the potential lifelong implications that come with this as well. And I also think that there's just a lack of understanding when it comes to natural bodybuilding in terms of what can be achieved. So if you haven't heard of anyone who's like a really good natural model athlete or natural role model in the bodybuilding space, or a really good natural athlete, then some names which sort of pop to my mind is like AJ Morris. So he is like a natural bodybuilding coach in the UK, very, very highly regarded. I think he's also got like a separate business which is like Natural Bodybuilding Worldwide. I think he's part of that brand. But if you go on like his Instagram and look through like his clients, which are all natural, and you know that they're natural because they compete in natural federations, which are federations that complete multiple different tests to assess an athlete's natural status. Also, if you look at their physiques, like they have some really good physiques, but there's not like the telltale signs that they're on gear. So for example, they don't have like the anabolic pop in like the delts or the traps where the androgen receptors are, or like the upper chest, and all those sorts of areas as well. So you can see that his athletes are natural, but they are to a really, really high standard. So those are some role models that I would consider that I look up to in bodybuilding. And I would also say, in terms of the fitness space, there's also loads of role models out there. I mean, some that spring to mind, so like the old school, like Joey D, obviously his brother as well, Rob Lipsett, and then Sean Fitzpatrick is probably a more recent, I guess, Instagram influencer. So these are all guys who have been lifetime naturals, to my knowledge anyway, throughout their whole of their fitness career, and they've achieved really, really good physiques, very, very respectable. So yeah, there is a lot more to the natural game than probably people perceive there to be. And I think previously it was like, oh, the only way you can achieve the physique that you want to achieve is through using PED usage. When actually, if you pull the majority of the people off the street, like I'm talking general population here, not like specifically into bodybuilding, you said, what do you want to look like, when you're down the beach or when your top's off? They would probably point out a natural physique, or they would have aspirations to achieve a physique which is very achievable naturally. So those are the sort of people who don't need to necessarily use PEDs, and who actually just need to apply themselves and go through the natural journey. While there are other people out there in a very small minority who would potentially actually benefit from using PEDs. So that's not for those people. What we're talking to here is the general population who should be sticking to that natural path. So Charlie, I'll hand over to yourself if you want to start off. We've got some bullet points we want to run through, but we're going to kind of bounce off each other and kind of keep it a pretty fast and loose pod.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to kind of come off what you've just said, a lot of people are misled in what they can achieve and what they actually want to achieve. So, the likes of AJ Morris, he lives and breathes bodybuilding. That is his entire life, is his entire business, and that is his ultimate goal at the end of the day. Whereas the likes of Joey D, Rob Lipsett, people like that, they are more the lifestyle approach. So they show you what you actually can do without, devoting your entire life to it. Obviously, they've committed a lot of time to training and eating well and, just enjoying themselves along the process. But there is kind of two camps there. And, why should you stay natural? That's essentially what we're going to cover here. So as Jason said, you can build a great physique without it taking any performance enhancing drugs. It just takes longer. There's a lot of talk when people take PEDs in the sense of it's classed as cheating, and people think you take steroids and that's immediately like, okay, that's going to elevate your progress. But that's not the case. You still have to put in work. Whereas building that physique, you can still do it. It does just take that longer process. You can achieve what most people want to look like. So as Jason said, with if you want to take your top off on the beach, or you just want to have some visible abs, you want to have better muscle definition, that can be done naturally and realistically, but it is going to take longer than 6-12 months. You're going to have to put a significant amount of years into that, which a lot of people aren't prepared to do. So you do have to accept that, it is going to take you a little bit longer than you might want to. And if you're kind of starting from nothing and you're wanting to get beach lean or get absolutely jacked for your holiday in 6 months' time, realistically it's not happening. You can put as much effort in as you want, but you're not going to look how you want to within the time frame that you want. Is going to take a lot longer. Jason and I have been in this for many years, and we're now getting to a point where we have developed naturally and potentially reaching our natural limit to a certain extent. There is obviously progress still to be made, but even then, to get to this point, it's taken a long time and a significant amount of years of consistent training.
Just on natural limit, I'd just like to pick up the point that there's a natural Australian bodybuilder who I follow called Aaron Curtis. He's been on Facebook for a while, and like a very long time. I mean, when I was following him, we're literally talking about, I've followed him for over 10 years now. So he had released a video on YouTube ages ago about why he stays natural and how come he always stuck to that path. And basically the interviewer asked him, well, you look pretty jacked already and he's got a great physique, and they said, why were you going to stay natural even if you don't make any progress? And he's like, even if I don't make any progress whatsoever, he's still going to stay natural, because for him it's just about the mindset and the fact that he hasn't used any sort of gear. There's no cheating involved or anything like that in his head, and he still wants to play the game where he wants to push himself to his natural limit. So even if he feels like he's at it physiologically, then mentally he still wants to try and push himself to see if he can get an extra 1% out. And actually he's a really good role model within the natural bodybuilding space, because I believe it was last year, maybe the year before, where he competed in an Australian natural bodybuilding show and finally won his pro card. And he had literally been competing for it must be close to like nearly 20 years, maybe just under 20 years, and after that length of time he's finally won his pro card as a natural, which is absolutely wild to see. So it's interesting to sort of see how he's continued to progress his physique slowly, and he's also progressed competitively as an athlete despite being in the space for so long, and he's always stayed natural, and now he's finally reaping the rewards for that. So it does just take a longer arc, but it's definitely possible to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that just proves that you do have to accept that it's going to take longer. But once you accept that, it makes it a lot easier and it makes that natural journey more worthwhile. Because if you were to hop on PEDs and accelerate that progress, then you are just exposing yourself to unnecessary risks. And we are obviously going to cover that. But yeah, there's definitely an element of discipline involved, which I think leads us on to our next point, Jason.
So this one to me is probably the one that resonates the most with me, is because that if I know that if I'm disciplined to the gym, then that can carry over to other areas of my life as well. So by building your physique naturally, there is no shortcuts. It's just you, and also no one can take that away from you. So it's, in my opinion, it's a very respectable, opportunity, or I guess it's a very respectable things status wise if you have a respectable physique. So I think that because you have to build it yourself, it shows how disciplined you are. So if you're at like a certain body fat percentage, like Charlie's a good example right now, he's obviously worked really really hard to build his discipline towards his photo shoot prep. He hasn't missed a beat. He's always counted his calories. He's always achieved a step target, and the results show, because he's really leading now, best physique he's ever had. He's ready for this photo shoot. He's going to absolutely smash it, I'm sure. So that is something that, as a natural athlete, you must have discipline, and it's not discipline over like a 6-week cut challenge or discipline over a year. It's discipline over a lifetime, or certainly a very long period of work. So in order to build that physique, and it's not something that you can shortcut. So something that really really resonates with me is just building that discipline by staying on that natural path.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I 100%, my discipline pre-photo shoot or pre-photo shoot prep to during prep has been wildly different. Pre-photo shoot prep, I was always missing training sessions. I wasn't getting as many steps in. My quality of work wasn't as high. But now I'm up at like 6 a.m. every day. If I'm not training, I'm going to do fasted cardio at like 7 a.m. If I am training, I'm in the gym for 6:30, 7:15. Obviously, there's a half an hour drive in there, and I'm getting everything done because I know I have this goal to achieve and I have that end point. But then also afterwards, I know how I feel during this prep and how it affects my work quality and my productivity, and ultimately how I show up for my clients, because they're paying for a service, and that discipline then carries over into so many factors of life. And I think it really helps you appreciate what you can get from life, because now I think pre-photo shoot I was just kind of like going through the motions. I wasn't really striving for anything, but now I have this purpose, I have this goal, and that helps with the discipline to keep me on track, and they're like the sort of behaviors and the habits that I'm going to keep going forward. So yeah, it definitely builds that discipline and makes you aware that there's no shortcuts. I haven't missed a step, I haven't missed a training session, and the results will show from that. If you're skipping training sessions regularly, then you can't then take PEDs to then make up for that. That's just not how it works, and you're shooting yourself in the foot essentially.
Yeah, I'll just go move on to the next one then. So we've got, this is probably the one that I think is really misunderstood from younger teenagers or people who basically are under the age of 25 and hopping on gear, where their frontal lobe hasn't fully formed yet, so they don't really they're not basically an adult, or they certainly don't have an adult brain, because they're not considering the health implications when it comes to taking PEDs. So for example, if I put myself in the scenario where, and I have been in the scenario, I guess, as a 17-year-old lifter, you're like trying to get into the gym, maybe seeing a little bit of noob gains but not seeing loads of progress. You open up some social media, you see some ludicrously jacked guy, maybe he's talking about steroid usage, maybe you can understand that he's on steroids based on the way he's looking, and you think, oh, maybe I'm going to go away, I'm going to take steroids because I want to look like him. But what you're not thinking of is maybe 8 years down the line, or even like if you only do 1 or 2 cycles, then you can really impact your fertility. So when you do want to have a family 8 years down the line, 10 years down the line, whenever it will be, actually that means that sometimes you can become infertile, so therefore that can prevent you from having a family. And I think that what I kind of see as the issue in the industry is that young kids are jumping on these decisions without really thinking through the real consequences of it, because they don't really understand what it's like to apply yourself to whether it's bodybuilding or whether it's anything else for like 10-15 years, because they're so like young and naive when it comes to that. And yeah, there are examples out there where they take steroids at a young age, and they have the right coaching, and it can work and all that sort of stuff, and they can have a really successful career, and it can be worth it financially as well. But what I generally see is that the fertility issues aren't considered properly. But on top of that, there's also the heart issues, liver issues, there's cardiovascular problems, problems, strokes, high blood pressure, kidney damage, hormonal imbalances as well. People can easily get like gynecomastia, which is probably like the most ironic side effect of PEDs, because here they are trying to look really, really masculine, trying to make sure they look really aesthetic with their top off, and then they go and get gynecomastia because they've jacked up their testosterone and their estrogen has then rebounded, which then means that they've accumulated this mass of basically like milk or like tissue underneath their nipple, which actually makes them look less masculine at all. So it's a bit of a it's a bit of an interesting one, really, and that's something that people don't appreciate. They don't appreciate how the ways that you can mitigate that's having gynecomastia. And if you do have it and it does permanently form, i.e. it hardens, then that means that you need to have an operation to get that removed, which can be a cost. Otherwise, you're stuck with that for life. So even if you come off the gear, you will still have evidence, or there'll still be the gynecomastia present underneath like your nipples. So that's something that people need to be aware of as well. And there's also you can also have a look for all the enhanced athletes which are passing away. So some that spring to mind recently is probably Joe Aesthetics. I think that was last year, and Joe was a really good guy on social media. He put out lots of positive content. I would probably consider him like a net positive in terms of the content he put out there. However, he was very open about his usage and how much, especially when he was in his earlier days, how much he used to blast gear and not take care of his health. And the guy was like ludicrously shredded all year round and living in very hot countries and doing all sorts of crazy activities, which were probably putting a lot of stress on his body. So he obviously, and I'm sure that his PED usage contributed towards his passing away as well, which is really sad.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing to highlight is, you can take the PEDs, you can see the results from that, you can feel absolutely fantastic and have a really successful career off the back of it, but eventually it will catch up to you, and that is a prime example. You look at the likes of Ronnie Coleman, for example. He's not in the best shape, let's put it as that. He's had multiple surgeries, and yeah, that is as a result of how far he's pushed his body, both physically and with the amount of drugs that he's taken. And that is obviously something to consider, but not only the physical effects, but the psychological effects as well. The effect PEDs have on your brain and your dopamine receptors. You identify as this jacked, larger than life steroid user, and that is then going to impact your ego and how you perceive yourself. But that's not going to last forever. It is going to fade eventually. And if you're attaching your sense of self-worth to how you look based on your muscles and, ultimately this steroid use, it's going to come to an end eventually. You risk losing your identity when you eventually have to come off. You're going to be absolutely jacked for your 20s going into your 30s, but then what are you going to do into your late 30s and 40s when you are starting to drop off, no one really cares, and you then have to come off, but then you've attached your entire life's work to looking like this. It's just going to throw you the complete opposite end, and it's just going to be like a pendulum. You're just going to be so unstable in terms of your psychological stability, essentially. And then alongside that, there's the mood swings, the irritability, the aggression, otherwise known as roid rage. And obviously there are things that you can do to combat that, but it is something to consider. So it is definitely a real thing that can then have a negative impact on those around you. So your relationships with partners, family, work, and your overall well-being and how you perceive yourself. And not just from like a sense of self-worth, but also your mental health and verging into like suicidal thoughts, essentially, because if you are risking your identity, you're then questioning what you're doing every single day, and that's just not a nice place to be. Now obviously extreme dieting does induce some of these behaviors, but it's very easy to reverse. All it takes is bumping calories up, getting your physiology back to a normal state, and then you can reverse that irritability, those mood swings. But if you're constantly pummeling your body with extra drugs, then there's only so much you can do. There's also the body dysmorphia element. Now when you do start dieting to the extremes, that's going to come in at some point. You're always going to think you don't look good enough. That's something I mentioned in my check-in this week with my coach, in the sense of I don't feel like I look good enough. I've been dieting for 17 weeks now. I've lost 17 kilos, so like a kilo a week, and I'm kind of like, I feel like I should look better. Now realistically, to the average person, I look absolutely fantastic, but when you have perceptions of how you should look, there are obviously some dysmorphia issues in there. And Joe Brightman talks a lot about this, in the sense of he doesn't realise how big he is. He's over 100 kilos, and he will walk through a public place and people will start looking at him, and he then doesn't realize how big he is, but then seeing that and experiencing that then kind of puts it into perspective, because he's surrounded by these people that are equally as big as him. But then when he just goes into a normal setting or goes to a restaurant or tries to go out for a nice meal, he is then like the freak essentially. So there is some dysmorphia associated with it as well.
I mean, that's really interesting about the Joe Brightman thing in terms of him, because I remember when he mentioned that, and I think I messaged you at the time, and the guy at the time, I think he was just towards the end of his bulk, and he's like 130 kilos, and he's absolutely ginormous, like a 130 kilo human who's packed on loads of muscle. I think he's like 6'2", 6'3". He's a classic physique IFBB pro. Well, he's a men's physique IFBB pro going into classic physique, and yeah, he looks absolutely wildly good and huge. Pipes are massive. And he's there saying on the other side of the camera on the YouTube video that yeah, he feels really small, and I'm like, fucking hell, man. Like, and but I can, it's weird because I can relate to it as well. Like I'm weighing like 90 kilos at the minute, which is definitely more than the average person in the world, and have a reasonable amount of muscle mass for someone of my height, 5'9" by the way, nearly 6 foot. And you know, it's actually like I feel small as well sometimes, and then I think like, well, if he's feeling like he's small, then what does he think of me? But it's all just a bit of a mind fuck. I think, to be honest, when you get into the gym, like as soon as you've seen yourself with a pump, then you'll always never be as big as your pump. So yeah, it's just that's when the body dysmorphia starts. But obviously, Joe Brightman is a big social media star, and I think that social media does present things in different lights. So we'll move on to that point. So for example, when I first came up in the industry, I mean, yeah, they were started sort of getting into fitness. There wasn't really loads of people that were posting on social media. I actually remember seeing a picture of Ziz actually on Bebo when he passed away, and I remember I didn't really know anything at the time, and I remember looking at him thinking that guy looked absolutely ludicrous. But that was like probably the few and far between. If I was to open up pretty much anyone's Instagram now and go on their newsfeed, anyone who's like reasonably into fitness or into the gym, obviously I'm very into it, and I would need to go into your search feed or your For You feed or your reels. There will be just constant bombardment of assisted athletes doing bodybuilding poses, and certainly my algorithm's like this anyway, probably just a reflection on me. But I think the fact that I'm viewing it now as a 28-year-old, I can understand, okay, that guy's on PEDs, that's his career. I'm not going to look like that because I'm natural, and that's okay, because I'm on my own journey. I'm comparing myself to my previous physique. I'm not necessarily comparing myself to that physique, and I can kind of mentally compartmentalize what I'm seeing. Most of the time, I'd say sometimes you think, oh God, I look so small, and you probably are comparing yourself to that, but I can kind of, sometimes, yeah, you can step away from it, is what I would say. But when you're 16 years old and you're trying to gain some muscle in the gym, and you're probably a scrawny kid, you're just desperately trying to pack on mass, then you know your brain hasn't fully formed, which you kind of touched on earlier. And therefore, when you see these bodybuilders online, or these people who are pushing some steroid usage, and I wouldn't say like that most influencers now are, but there's definitely pockets of them who are on gear, and they are saying, oh yeah, one cycle doesn't hurt. You can potentially make all these gains, and then you can maintain your mass for the rest of your life after one cycle. It's not going to impact your health, all that sort of stuff, which is untrue. And those are the risky posts on social media that go viral, and then people can be influenced by that. And if you're a 16-year-old and your brain's not fully formed, then you're easy to be affected by that. And if you also then at that age don't recognize that bodybuilding might not be like a lifelong pursuit, but if you're going to start taking steroids, then that could impact your life. So you need to think about the impact that exogenous hormones has an effect on your life across the whole duration of it, not just for, oh, let's just do like a cycle of steroids for 16 weeks or maybe 12 weeks, and then I'll be fine after that. It's not how it works.
Yeah, and you know, is it worth the potential downsides to it? So just a few, like hair loss and acne, like are you really sacrificing those, which you're probably going to value when you get into like your 20s and your late 20s? I know a lot of friends have like receding hairlines and things like that, and they obviously wish they could avoid that. You are essentially speeding that up by taking these drugs, and is it worth it for just some bigger muscles? And I feel like we'll come onto it at some point, but you know, there's so many other things that you can do to get to that point without just taking so many extra supplements. And you know, you could start at 16, 17, 18, but then you get to 21, you get a job, you get a girlfriend, whatever that may be, and you realise it's not for you, but you then still have to take X, Y and Z supplements to keep yourself healthy, to keep your heart healthy, to regulate your hormones. And it's a big commitment that you're not aware that you're signing up for, and you should definitely start naturally and allow yourself to see what progress you can make before jumping into the PED route, because you don't essentially need it. You can make so much progress beforehand, but I don't think a lot of people realise that.
I'd also say that as you progress through naturally, like it's not a linear graph in terms of your progression. So you'll start off, you make some noob gains, and then you'll kind of start to plateau at a certain level, and then you've got kind of two choices to make. You can either continue at your plateau, or you can really dial in on whether it's your sleep, your nutrition, your training, your execution in the gym. Maybe get yourself a coach, get someone that can take you to that next level. And I've actually found that when I dialed into more specific bodybuilding training and started following people like Kuba or other athletes or other coaches, sorry, who put out a lot of good content on social media, and they give you like a lot of tips about how you should do your programming, then actually you can continue to develop and level up your physique naturally. So I personally don't feel like there is any need to use steroids at any point whatsoever. But I think that the main point there that Charlie's mentioning is the fact that if you train naturally for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then you're going to figure out, actually, is this really for me? Is this something that I actually genuinely enjoy? And then you can make an educated decision about, well, if it's something that I really enjoy and I identify as someone who goes to the gym, has a good physique, maybe competes in bodybuilding. And I'd only say ever to use PEDs if you're going to compete in bodybuilding. Otherwise, it is just not worth it whatsoever. It's not, in terms of the implications on your health. So once you've had those years under your belt as a natural, if you then want to go to that assisted route and you do want to take bodybuilding professionally and you do want to take it seriously, then go ahead and do that, because you've already got your stripes, if you will, and you're ready now to take it to that next level. But I would say that for the majority of people, the way that they think about it, or certainly the majority of teenagers I'm sort of referring to here, putting them, I guess, in that kind of group, is that they'll do maybe 6 months of training, think, oh, this is pretty good, and it's kind of like just a bit of a fad or something that they're kind of potentially getting into, and then they'll make the decision to hop on gear, and then they'll realise that actually, maybe it's not for them, maybe they prefer something different, maybe they want to do something different at the time. However, they've already made permanent changes to their hormonal system and potentially affected their fertility for the rest of their life. So it is something that people really need to be aware of. Another thing that's not discussed is the financial commitment when it comes to taking PEDs. So this is not necessarily just the cost of buying the PEDs, which typically have to be done through the black web or some dealer, if anyone knows anyone, but it's also actually that there's a lot of stuff which comes along with it. So your food's going to be increasing, your food bills, because you're going to need to have all this additional nutrition in order to fuel your body and to make use of the steroids. Otherwise, there's no point in taking them. What also isn't considered is getting your blood work done regularly. That can be expensive, but it is highly recommended. There's lots of good coaches who do preach like a safe usage model, and one of their key areas that they always discuss is getting your blood work done frequently. I mean, even if you're a natural, to be honest, I'd get it done like once every year, or maybe every 5 years as a natural, just to see where your health is. But as someone who's on PEDs, you definitely want to be taking it much more frequently than that, so that you can assess if there's any changes to your biomarkers in your blood tests in a negative direction, and therefore you can be proactive about the decisions that you make and whether you need to come off them early. Because if you don't do your blood work, then actually these issues can compound, and then you can find yourself in a whole heap of other health issues. So that's obviously an additional cost. You're also going to have to buy new clothes, because you're going to increase your mass is going to increase, your body weight's going to increase. So you're going to move from like a small, medium to a XL, 5XL, whatever it'll be, depending on how big you go. And if you're a 17-year-old kid who's maybe got a part-time job at like Tesco or somewhere, then that's something that you probably can't afford and can't justify. So it's just something that you need to be aware of, as well as there is a big financial commitment when it comes to taking PEDs.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's so many factors to consider. If you're just, if Dave down the gym has offered you a vial of testosterone, if you're just jumping on that because it seems like the cool thing to do, you're then not processing everything else that comes alongside it: the health, the psychological impacts, the financial impacts, the effect on your overall life. And it does require a big thought process that has to go into it. And there are risks to your natural journey. So a bad role model, assisted fitness influencers and coaches, they can encourage their followers and viewers to hop on PEDs by showing their immediate results. And they have like these before and afters of X client who achieved this, and then they got to the next point in 6, 8, 12 weeks without showing the effects that has. And ultimately they're just looking for that before and after. They're not caring about your long-term health. They see you as a number essentially, and you're just lining their pockets, but they have very little knowledge or practical experience of being a bodybuilder or being in the fitness space. They're just like, okay, who are these young, relatively immature and what's the word? My
Vulnerable.
brain's switched off. Yes, vulnerable. So yeah, they're looking for these vulnerable people that they can exploit. So they just tell you to take X, Y, and Z because they know that that's going to get them the changes they're looking for. But then they'll drop you the second they've got that result, and you've then got to deal with the consequences after that.
Yeah, I think that point can't be overstated enough. So that is one of the biggest issues that I see is there is a group of young guys who are feeling very insecure in the way that they look. They are looking for role models. They are looking for people who can help them with this insecurity. Maybe they feel like they're too scrawny. Maybe they feel like they're overweight. They see people online, and that then creates like their perception of what they should look like as a man. And I'll put that in quotation marks because I've got other views on that, but that's something that they are then these coaches will then prey on these people, and I think you summed up really well there when you said that the coaches will effectively put them on a course of steroids. They will then charge them money for that, obviously for their coaching experience. The steroids will get you results, like in case that's not clear, like steroids do get you results, but they just get you results with a whole load of health implications as well, and results that you can arguably achieve naturally up to a certain point as well. So they'll run you on a cycle of these steroids. They'll obviously get a good before and after picture, and then you'll think, oh, okay, excellent, I've achieved what I need to achieve, and then you'll stop coaching with them, or they'll drop you and they'll bring in someone else, and it's all like this short-term cycle where what's being spat out the other side is they're getting cash for it, and or you as in the client is basically being left with these health issues which are going to carry into your later life and potentially affect your fertility. And then also once you come off those steroids, you're then going to be left with all the psychological issues as well, because you may be identified as someone who was on steroids, or a big person who was muscular, and now you've lost that muscle, so you feel like you've lost your status, you've lost your body confidence, and you end up in a worse position than you were before. So contrast that to if you work with a coach who encourages you to keep yourself natural and to build your physique, then you should be seeing consistent progress, not at the same rate that obviously if you was using steroids, but still like consistent progress. And then if therefore you can help derive your confidence maybe from your training performance improving in the gym, and with that comes the development to your physique as well. And that is much more sustainable, and it takes longer to do it, but it's much more sustainable for yourself to actually go ahead and achieve that. So it's not like a quick win. It's actually something that's like a long-term training arc where you build your body confidence along with your physique.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of have to ask yourself why you want to go unassisted. Is it just to look better, to take a few pictures of with your abs out on holiday? Or do you actually want to make it your career and your life? Because essentially that's what you're signing up for when you take the PEDs. If you're just looking for a quick transformation, you want to get shredded, you want to see some abs, you want to look marginally better, but it's not for an actual purpose. And you want to go on a lad's holiday, you want to look good, you want to try and pull some I can't speak. Want to pull someone of the opposite sex, whatever that may be, that's probably not worthwhile because you're risking so much to do that. But if you want to make it your career and your life, as we said, stick to it for a significant number of years. I personally, I trained 4-5 years suboptimally, but then the difference between going from that to training in a better, more optimal fashion, pushing myself to failure, and with a structured training program, the differences I saw going from being a complete beginner all the way to where I am now, it's actually mind-blowing the progress you can make if you actually apply yourself. And if you have a coach, if you put the work in and you actually show yourself what you're capable of, you can get the changes that you're looking for. Yes, it's going to take a little bit longer. Yes, you do have to be patient, but that's just the nature of the game. And if you're not prepared to accept that, then you have to accept the health implications that come out the back of it, the long-term health issues, probably not straight away when you get into your late 20s and 30s, definitely, but you are the one that's going to have to deal with that, and those around you are going to have to process those issues as well, because it does affect the immediate surrounding circle essentially.
Yeah, I think that can't be understated. Again, in terms of the approach when it comes to training and how much you can push your physique by improving your training program and your execution and your exercise selection and your form and your tempo and all these different variables that you can nail. So again, similar to Charlie, there, I've probably been pushing myself to train much more to failure over the last 3 years, and I've adjusted my training program to focus more on like upper body development. So previously, I would always do 2 lower body days and then maybe like 3 upper body days, and that would always be like my routine. But then I ended up building like massive legs because genetically my legs aren't too bad anyway. But so actually, when I took a step back and thought, I'm not just going to spin my wheels here. I want to really go away and design myself a serious program which is tapered more towards upper body and building your top line. And I've really thought about the exercise selection and how I wanted to approach each exercise and working on training to failure, progressively overloading, making sure you're getting slow eccentric reps. There's lots and lots of ways you can adjust your training program. Actually, I've seen some of the best results over certainly the last 2 or 3 years as we've got later into my training career. So if I look back at pictures from me when I was at university, I was reasonably big dude, wasn't particularly lean, but like my upper body now compared to my upper body then is much better, and also my lower body is on par, if not better as well. So that awareness, I guess, and due patience when it comes to learning the principles is something that will pay dividends in the long run. I also think that there's the people who take steroids, and we've all seen them in gyms, people who are really obviously on gear, but they actually don't look that impressive compared to some natural physiques. And I think that's where it comes to where people underestimate what you can achieve naturally. So when you take steroids, you will see your physique elevate. As we've said, they do work. However, if you don't nail all the other aspects when it comes to training, nutrition, sleep, execution, exercise selection, training program, form, all the rest of it, all the other variables, then your physique's just probably going to look pretty natural anyway, but you're still going to have the health implications. So that's something that's really, really important to know is that regardless of how the route you want to take, you will always be limited unless you nail the absolute basics. And we've spoke about it before on the podcast. But these are the areas that you must nail to build your physique development. Like, yes, you can throw in steroids and that will give you a small boost at the start. But if you're someone who's naturally, then you can still build that physique. And that's something that you can continue to build on. But you just need to make sure you nail the basics first.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's something to be said about the delayed gratification that comes with that. And it kind of stems into that discipline. You're doing something now, knowing that later down the line there is going to be a payoff for it. Like, as an example, I am sacrificing food now, potentially sacrificing social occasions and, sacrificing that short-term enjoyment, that those quick dopamine hits. But I know at the end of this photo shoot prep, I am going to get the rewards from that. And ultimately, sacrificing a lot of things like not using PEDs is not really a big sacrifice, because you're probably going to thank yourself a lot more when you get to the end. You've showed yourself what you can do, and when you have that discipline, that's going to carry over into so many other factors of your life. Whereas if you're just always taking the easy route, you're taking the easy option, like taking steroids and not getting your food in, not sleeping well, and training suboptimally, then you are going to suffer from that. Whereas if you actually push yourself in the gym, you push yourself to failure, you have that consistent structured nutrition, and you actually work for it, it's going to feel so much better when you get to the other side and you get 8, 9, 10 years into your journey and you're like, okay, I feel like I've actually developed a reasonably respectable physique. And then, as Jason said, if you compare yourself to people in the gym that probably are on steroids but they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what they're taking, and they're just taking it for the sake of it, you can then compare yourself to them and think, yeah, I've actually done this properly, and you can then get some satisfaction from that.
Yeah, I guess like one of the last points I really want to just emphasize is that your natural journey is exactly that. It is your natural journey. Like, you are in your body this is the only body you've got for your whole lifetime. So if you're going to make decisions when you're in your 17, 18, 19, even maybe early 20s, that you want to abuse PEDs, then those are going to have implications for, touch wood, you go on and live till your 80s, maybe 85, or as long as you can live, maybe less if you depends on how much you abuse PEDs. but this is your only body that you've got to get you through your whole of your life. So if you abuse it when you're really young and don't take your health seriously, then you will feel those repercussions earlier on in your old age. And when you compare yourself to other people, you're just seeing a snapshot of what their physique looks at this day, at this time. You're not going to go see them or their physique when it's in 40 years' time and they haven't been able to raise a family due to the fertility issues, or they've got some sort of like heart disease issue, which means that they've shortened their lifespan, so they're not going to see their kids grow up into adults. Or so there's a really serious edge to this where actually you need to think about, is this decision to take PEDs something that I'm going to regret when I am looking back on my life and I'm in my 60s and 70s? And it might not be, and it might, because you might be in a position where you get a coach, you're going to get blood work done, you're going to pursue bodybuilding professionally or physique development professionally, and you're going to really try and make a career out of it, and that's something that is definitely potential. But there's also a side to it where you think, actually, if I make this decision now, am I going to regret it when I'm older, when I can't have kids, if I can't see my kids grow up because I'm going to get too ill or pass away or not be able to run around with them when they're growing up. So it's just something that I really want to leave you guys with, is when people make these decisions, or when people who are potentially going to make these decisions, just get them to think for it through that lens. You've got one body for your whole life.
Yeah, and ultimately, if you can find someone who has gone through that journey and talk through like their risks and what they experienced and would they recommend it. Preferably someone that's a professional, like a coach, for example. If you're just talking to, as I said, Dave down the gym, he's probably going to encourage you to do it because then there might be some incentive. I don't know, he might get a commission from his dealer for selling X amount of vials. I don't know how it works, but yeah, speak to someone who's actually worth what they're speaking about, like a professional coach, and then weigh up the pros and cons. If you're, I don't know, a sub 25 years old, then there's a big decision to be making very early on. And is it a decision you're prepared to deal with the complications later down the line? That's obviously probably the biggest question you need to ask yourself. But yeah, definitely weigh up the pros and cons and think, 30, 40, 50 years into the future rather than how you're going to look in 6 to 12 months' time.
A good indication of if you're going to try and look for a good coach who's potentially going to take you through that PED journey, or not, is if they discourage you to use PEDs, because that would be a sign that they're a good coach. Because a good coach would know that chances are you have a very limited percentage of going pro and making a career out of this, and they would understand that they don't want to fuck up your life essentially, so therefore they should discourage you to use PEDs. And unless you can present a really well put together argument about why you should use them and why you want to make this your choice and why it's a viable option for you, then they might consider it. So if you speak to a coach and you say, look, I'm thinking about hopping on gear, can I be coached by you? And they go, yeah, sounds great, just sign here and send me off 100 quid, 200 quid and order X, Y and Z, that's a bad coach. They're not interested in your health, they're waiting to see that paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely. As Jason said, no one should be encouraging you to take them. It should be a conversation that's had between both you and that professional about your reasons why, and they should talk you through the risks of taking them. Ultimately, it's your decision at the end of the day, but they should advise you against it. Then if you're set on making this like your life and your career, and you believe you have something in you to achieve that goal, then by all means it's your decision, but you have to factor in the risks into that and actually get someone to guide you through that path who's going to minimise those risks as much as possible.
Excellent. Right, we'll wrap it up there. Appreciate the listeners for going through that. Like, it is obviously a very serious topic. I felt like I had to get it off my chest. I'm sure Charlie felt the same. So yeah, thank you very much for tuning in for another week of Beyond Reps. Make sure you like and subscribe all of our content. We are now on YouTube as well. You can follow us on Spotify and follow us on Instagram on Beyond Reps Pod. Speak to you soon.